Alright, Pete. Agency Arts, MBay Arts here. Agent MBay, to be more precise. I'm over at Contemporary Art Network. I'm about to go check them out. They got an exhibition, an installation for the people. I think that's the name of it, actually. In collaboration with Something in the Water and Pharrell. And so they've been doing some big things in the area since opening up back in August. So finally got a chance to come out here. I'm gonna check them out, see what they got going on.
The Spanish set up Santa Fe in 1610 to serve as an administrative and missionary center. The New World became a haven from the Old. In search of religious freedom, the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth in 1620 and started the New England. The Dutch were not to be left out. They owned Albany, New York. And they also made the most famous acquisition of all, purchasing Manhattan Island to found New Amsterdam. Sweden also joined in, starting the first Swedish colony at Fort Christina, now Wilmington, Delaware. By 1650, the Swedish and New Sweden, the Dutch besides existing European rivalries, tensions developed that soon brought the colonies in conflict. By the end of 1664, 3 European powers remained in North America. The British controlled most of the eastern seaboard and a large region north. The French had settlements from Quebec to Montreal and influence over the interior. And Spain had claim over Florida and the Southwest, but with few settlements. The next century would see greater expansion and exploration. The English settled in Carolina at Charleston in 1670.
Because well-informed voters usually prefer to vote for the man they consider best, regardless of party. When voting hours are over, the voting place is closed, and the election officials prepare to count the votes. Generally speaking, only the election officials and party watchers are allowed to be present when the votes are counted. In some communities, impartial watchers are appointed by the court. The boxes are unlocked, and the ballots are taken out and counted lawfully. Election officials are the only ones permitted to handle the ballot. The election clerks mark the count on their official tally sheet. Some ballots are marked with straight black ticks. Others are marked for individual candidates. A ballot should be marked carefully. For example, if one is marked both ways, it may be discarded in any state. If an X is marked outside a box, election officials in some states may invalidate the ballot. In some places, the ballot may be discarded also if two candidates are marked to the same mark. Usually, very few ballots have to be discarded because of improper marks. When all the ballots are tallied, the votes are open.
In September, once the evidence comes in or doesn't come in, so by September we should know where this lawsuit is headed. There's a lot of fishy stuff happening at the Postal Service. So the new Postmaster General, Trump appointed a huge Trump donor. He donated a couple $1 million, and that's not ordinary. Normally you don't have political cronies appointed as Postmaster General. Usually somebody who's grown up in the post office. And what the new Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, has been doing, he says they need to cut costs, which is true, but what he's doing so far is he has suspended overtime for postal workers, which means that he ultimately job is not collecting overtime. He just leave it. Is this all meant to create some kind of contract for?
It has been kind of a weird news day. The president this afternoon said out loud that his supporters should try to vote twice in the November election. But twice, of course, is a felony. But the president is overtly out loud in public asking his supporters to try it to see if they can get away with it. When the presidential behavior like this, the system just kind of breaks. It's like just normal news organizations just aren't making clear. Like it just like all of the nails work until you try to really explain what you're doing, and then it just doesn't compute. So this is what I mean. Here's what's this thing from NBC News out tonight. President Donald Trump suggested today that people in North Carolina should vote twice in the November election, once by mail and once in person, escalating mass confusion and doubt on the validity of the results. The president said, quote, so let them send it in and let them go vote. And if their system's as good as they say it is, then obviously they will be able to vote. If it is tabulated, they'll be able to vote. The president said this when asked about the mail-in voting system in North Carolina. He concluded, quote, so that's the way it is, and that's what they should do. Yes, it is illegal to do what the president just told you to do, and in fact it is illegal to try to get people to do that. This is a weird day.
Welcome to Thursday is the presidential time. With just 40 days until the election, the President of the United States is openly signaling that he could take drastic action to attempt to hold on to power. But while maintaining his durable lead in the polls, the President is ramping up his attacks on the integrity of the election. And now he's publicly stated that he will not commit to a peaceful transfer of power.
In 1718, New Orleans was founded due to its location on the Mississippi near the coast of Mexico. The English expanded south with the arrival of settlers in Savannah, Georgia in 1733. By 1754, British and French interests began to compete as colonists vied for territories.
And in 1754, the entire East Coast was established as the 13 British colonies.
British influence extended along.
Americans cheered and finally celebrated their freedom.
In 1789, George Washington won the Electoral College with 100% of the vote. Whose vote was it? Probably not yours. Only 6% of the entire United States population was allowed to vote at all. Voting was a right that only white male property owners were allowed to exercise. By the 1820s and 1830s, the American population was moving from the East Coast into the Western frontier. Frontier farmers were resilient, self-reliant, and mostly ineligible to vote because they did not own land. As these new areas of the nation became states, they totally left out the property requirement for voting. Leaders such as Asa Jackson, the United States' first colonial president, promoted what he called universal suffrage. Of course, by
On the eastern seaboard, from Nova Scotia to Georgia, and as far west as the Appalachian Mountains, with an area around the Hudson Bay. The French claimed eastern Canada and Louisiana territories, and the Spanish were widely scattered over Florida, Texas, and the far southwest. A fight started over the Ohio River Valley. An English fort built at what is now Pittsburgh was taken over by the French.
The next morning, the groggy British allies were taken by surprise to find that the town was surrounded. General Washington and his troops returned with a victory. Now, with the mighty French naval fleet on their side, the Americans battled on until the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. Together, the French and the colonists trapped a large British army on Virginia's Yorktown Peninsula. British General Charles Cornwallis and his troops were greatly outnumbered, so he hid inside a cave while the rest of his British army surrendered to George Washington on October 19, 1781, a historic day for the Americans. And then peace negotiations began in April 1782, and a treaty was drafted by 3 American representatives, John Jay, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin. It took almost 2 years of negotiations until finally, on September 3rd, 1783, King George signed the Treaty of Paris. This marked the end of the American Revolution. Great Britain officially acknowledged
A contingent under George Washington built Fort Necessity nearby, but was ousted in July of 1754. It was the beginning of the French and Indian War.
From 1756 to 1763, the French and the Indians fought against the British and the colonists in the French and Indian War.
Yes, they had to march in the back, but they were there, they were present, they were college students.
So, despite the 15th Amendment, by 1892, only about 6% of black men in Mississippi were registered to vote. By 1960, it was only 1%. And of course, women were still totally out of the national voting picture. It wasn't until 1920 that the women's suffrage movement won their 30-year battle, and the 19th Amendment finally gave women the vote. Well, white women. The restrictions on African Americans, including African American women, remained. After World War II, many Americans began to question the state of U.S. democracy. How could a nation that fought for freedom and human rights abroad come home and deny suffrage based on race? The modern civil rights movement began in the 1940s with those questions in mind.
In May of 1947, with the referendum of the school election finally on the mark,
Also known as the 7 Years' War.
The British capture of Quebec in 1759 and the French surrender of Montreal in 1760 seriously eroded Concerned that a British victory would have set the balance of power, Spain joined the war against Britain in 1762. But Spain did not flip the balance. Britain prevailed, and the Treaty of Paris in 1763, which ended the war, was much in its favor. Britain gave all of North America east of the Mississippi River, including Canada and Florida.
But the war left the British with a bunch of debt, so they taxed the American colonists a lot.
To compensate Spain for the loss of Florida, France ceded all.
For voting, not expanding the vote beyond white men. By the 1850s, about 55% of the adult population was eligible to vote in the U.S., much better than 6%, but far from everybody. Then, in 1861, the American Civil War began largely over the issue of slavery and states' rights in the United States. When it was all over, the U.S. ratified the 15th Amendment, which promised that a person's right to vote could not be denied based on race, color, or previous condition as a slave. This meant that black men, newly affirmed as citizens of the U.S., would now be allowed to vote. Of course, laws are far from reality. Despite the promise of the 15th Amendment, intimidation kept African Americans from exercising their voting rights. States passed laws that limited the rights of African Americans to vote, including things like literacy tests, which were rigged so that not even literate African Americans were allowed to pass.
In 1880s, black reformers began organizing their own groups. In 1896, they founded the National Association of Colored Women, which became the largest federation of local black women's clubs. Their motto was lifting as we climb.
22 women that did something a long time ago that were college students at the time. Those 22 women saw the importance of the right to vote. So their first act of public service when they became an organization.
All of the territory west of Mississippi. The Indians had been in force in the war, especially the Louisiana on the frontier. To placate the Indians, the British Parliament passed the Proclamation of 1763, which forbid colonial advancement west of the Appalachian Divide. Resented by colonists eager to move west, this decree was the first of many acts to lead to the American Revolution.
And then, in 1765, they passed the Stamp Act, and all important papers and documents needed to be produced in Great Britain and have a special stamp, and the American colonists had to pay for this too. Even with new territory, colonists were very angry that the British were robbing them of their hard earnings by making them pay unreasonable taxes on things like tea and postage, and there was nothing they could do about it.